Good morning. It's Friday, April the 30th, and this is The Drill. Welcome to all the butchers, bakers, and candlestick makers out there. I'm Ron, your host, and the only true conservative in the United States today. So, yesterday I forgot the Pledge of Allegiance, and so I'm going to make sure we get that done today. But first is going to be the daily offering for spiritual warfare, the daily declaration for spiritual warfare. Execute judgment against my oppressors. My child, hear my words, for I am your Lord, your God. I will execute judgment in the morning and deliver those who have been plundered out of the hand of the oppressor. I will punish them for according to the fruit of their doings and will judge them according to my righteousness. I will hold you up in mercy, and in the multitude of the anxieties within you, my comfort will delight your soul. I will seek what was lost and bring back what was driven away. I will bind up the broken and strengthen what was sick. I will make a covenant of peace with you and cause showers of blessing to come down in your season. You will know that I am the Lord who has broken the bands of your yoke and delivered you from the hand of those who oppressed you. Prayer declaration. Father, because I am your sheep, you will deliver me from all the places where my oppressors have scattered me. You will feed me in good pasture and shelter me on the high mountains of your grace. I will no longer be a prey for the wicked, but will dwell safely, and no one will make me afraid. For you are my Lord, and you have broken the yoke of oppression and delivered me from my oppressors. And that's the daily declaration for spiritual warfare. And now the Pledge of Allegiance. Thank you. So to start off with, I'm going to say that I want, and I'm going to read a chapter from the book Power Hungry. So a lot of good stuff in that book. But mainly what I'm looking for, first of all, is to remind the conservatives, and I'm the true conservative because I understand this, that our job is to promote. It is not just to sit back and think, okay, well, what am I going to think about today? What am I going to talk about today? Oh, I think I'll pick up the New York Times and see what the New York Times has to say. I don't do that. Okay. We stand for certain things. Okay. And so that's what we do. We go out and we promote them. One of the things that we stand for as true conservatives that's realistic is we stand for the use of petroleum, coal, and natural gas. And why? Because that's the status quo. Okay, and the status quo is good. It lifts people out of poverty. The people that have a lot of oil and gas and coal and utilize it are rich, and those who don't are poor. They live a hand-to-mouth existence. And it doesn't take anything but just a little bit of study or research to figure this out. So, but anyways, so that's one of the reasons I'm reading it. The other one is a reality check. There's certain things that I'm going to talk about in my podcast that have to do with tactics and how to deal with the left, what to say to them, how to deal with them, how to think about them. But other things are reality checks, because if you don't know or understand what's real, then you're not going to defeat anybody. And a lot of times, you turn on the radio, you listen to Sean Hannity, and there's a debate going on. All it sounds like is people throwing words at each other back and forth and back and forth. And it's just, all it is just two sides expressing mere opinion, and there's nothing solid. None of that mere opinion is foundational. In other words, hooked or connected to reality and what's real. So that's the reason I'm reading that book. But before I get to that, I have some other things that I want to frustrations and whatnot, rants that I want to get onto. One of them is the use of words. Again, yesterday I was here listening to a broadcast, and it was actually on KBC. I'm looking at maybe going more towards KBC than KFI, because KFI is such a bottom-feeding organization. KFI is always looking for the dirtiest, nastiest stories it can find, scraping the bottom of the dumpster. And then everybody on the station, all the hosts will talk about this and analyze it, and it's just disgusting. So I'm getting really sick of KFI, and I'm going to look at listening to some other stations. One of them's KBC. But anyways, so it was on KBC, and they were talking about, again, migrants. And, you can't, words are so important. I'm not the only one that says this. Anthony Esolen, who wrote a book called Out of the Ashes, which is talking about recovering American culture. And by the way, it's a lot easier to defend something than have to recover it. If you don't give it up in the first place, then we don't got to work on going back. Okay, conserve everything. Make the presumption for the status quo unless there's a damn good reason to give it up. There's no reason for us to give up American culture. No reason. Okay. But Anthony Esolen is saying that the way to recover American culture is by recovering the truth, and the way you recover the truth is by recovering language, vocabulary. So yesterday I'm hearing somebody talking about migrants again, and I'm thinking, you're an idiot. I'm screaming at the radio, you're an effing idiot. You're so stupid. Because how do you fight migrants? How do you fight that? You're someone on the right, and you know all these people are coming across the border. Somewhere in the back of your mind that what these people really are is fugitives. And that's what they are in reality. They're fugitives. They're not illegal immigrants. They're definitely not migrants. And we know that because migrants are animals. Animals migrate. They go from place to place to graze. Okay? Or to find better weather, whatever. It's usually to get food. But they migrate. And human beings immigrate and emigrate. What is the difference? Property. Animals don't own property. They just wander around. They're going to eat whatever happens to be in front of them. They don't stop and inquire as to whose turf this is, so to speak. Okay? Human beings have, because animals obviously have no reasonable expectation of privacy. But human beings do. We have reasonable expectations of privacy, and because of that, we have property and property rights. And the property writ large is nations, countries. The United States of America is what it is because of its boundaries. And our property is differentiated from the property of, say, Mexico or Canada by the borders. We have certain rules for when it is that people can come into the country or not. If you break those rules, then you're simply a fugitive from justice. That's what the people that are coming across the border right now. And if you want to be a true conservative, that's the way you will refer to these people. Not as immigrants, not as illegal aliens, not as migrants, but as what they really are, fugitives from justice. And no matter what you want to call them, that's the way they are, and they know it. And we know it. Okay, they're going to have to spend the rest of their lives looking over their shoulders, waiting for the knock on the door from immigration that's going to scoop them up and put them on a plane and send them back to Mexico or send them back to El Salvador or wherever it is that they're from. Heck, go back to England for all I care. If that's where you're coming from, you're coming here illegally. I don't care where you're coming from, you're going back. But that's going to be all on us. Two things that we can do as individuals, because individuals have the power, the citizens have the power. Drop a dime. Or threaten to drop a dime. Tell people, when I see illegal aliens, I always just go call ICE. Okay? And maybe even make up something about having, I called ICE the other day, and then when I went back to that coffee shop where Mr. Illegal Alien worked, or Mr. Fugitive from Justice worked. It's hard to get used to using fugitive justice from justice, even for me, a true conservative, because you're bombarded with all of this other false language. But anyways, tell him, I called and he disappeared. He's gone. He vanished. Because the whole idea here is psychological. You want the left to know and understand that they aren't winning and they can't win. So whenever you're going to tell stories, make sure you tell a story in which the conservative wins. Hey, Mr. Lefty, you want all these people, you think it's swell that all these immigrants or all these people just come rushing over the border and become fugitives from justice? That's fine. As soon as I see them, I'm dropping a dime. All my friends are going to be dropping a dime. And all these individuals are going to get scooped up, they're going to be put on a plane, and they're going to go back to their country of origin. You can't win. You can't win. You can't win. That has to be the message to these, especially the squishy, soft radicals, the ones that have a $100,000 Tesla in their driveway. Okay, the umbrella carrying radicals, the ones that want to pretend that they're Marxists and because they set fire to things or commit arson or extortion or whatever, forget them. But the people that are fashionable radicals, fashionable Marxists, fashionable post-Marxists, they're especially vulnerable to this, where you just keep telling them you can't win. You can't win. I don't know why you bother to try, but you can't win. And that's true. The reality of the fact is that these folks that are fugitives are always going to be fugitives. They're never, ever going to, they're not going to come here and the first thing they do is going to go to Berlitz and learn how to speak English. They're not going to do it. They're going to go to the places that have, the neighborhoods in which there's, in first instance, they're coming from Mexico, Spanish-speaking people that listen to Spanish-speaking radio, that watch Spanish-speaking TV, right? And go to Spanish shops. There's all kinds of places in Southern California where you can go to. There's grocery stores. And I've been in them because I do shopping, Instacart and stuff like that. And I go in there and nobody speaks English. Nobody speaks English. It's just fascinating that it's a grocery store. One Superior Grocers doesn't speak much English, although there's another one, El Super. That's what it's called. The name of it isn't even in English. El Super. And you go in there, and again, you get a few words, broken English. They look at you weird, and you think you were in Mexico. So they're going to come and be in their own little, what is in essence, self-made ghettos. Okay, and they know that as long as I guess they live in that ghetto, they're going to be okay. But well, maybe not. But anytime they want to get outside that bubble, then there's a potential that they're going to be ending up on a plane going right back to El Salvador, Mexico, or wherever it is that they're from. So language is important. They're fugitives from justice, fugitives from justice, fugitives, fugitives, fugitives. That's the other thing, the psychological importance is, if you're going to drop a dime, you don't drop a dime on a migrant. Who's going to drop a dime on, call it, oh, there's a migrant here. But if you say there's a fugitive from justice, somebody that has violated our laws, that's different. I'm willing to drop a dime on somebody like that. So it's very important you use the right language, the realistic language. Back in a minute. Thank you. Another thing that I wanted to get off my chest, so to speak, is making demands. It occurred to me because what is it that I'm expecting that the talk show hosts and others, people I see on Twitter and whatnot, Leo Terrells, the Hugh Hewitts of the world, what is it I'm expecting them to do exactly? They like to be neutral. Leo Terrell, not as much. Leo Terrell's a much better conservative role model than Hugh Hewitt. Hugh Hewitt's just busy pretending he's a reporter. Maybe he went to law school. He should have gone to Columbia and gotten a degree in communication or something like that, because he seems to be fascinated with being some sort of a reporter and being neutral all the time. Excuse me. So, And as far as neutrality, well, what is it that I'm expecting them to do? Make demands. If you look at the left, sometimes it's not a bad idea to look at the left as a role model. What is it that the left does when something goes bad? So for the Republicans, let's say a Republican shoots his mouth off, right? The first thing that the left does is they go out get in front of the cameras and start making demands. I demand this. I demand that. I demand an apology. I demand an ethics investigation. I demand a resignation. I demand prosecution. I demand. We can and should do the same damn thing. Maxine Waters comes out and says, and it's clear to us what she was doing before that verdict, is to come out and say violence, threatening violence. The verdict will go the way I want it to, or I'm going to get my minions to burn down your city. And it's a threat of violence, and I demand that she step down immediately. And if she fails to do that, then I demand an ethics investigation. And should she be convicted in that ethics investigation, I demand that she be thrown out of the House of Representatives. Because if we don't make those demands, we're letting them off the hook. I hear callers to talk show hosts all the time say, "How come? Why? Why does it seem like they always get away with it?" Because, you moron, you let them get away with it. Don't do that. When you hear people on the left that are blowing it, get on Twitter, get on Instagram, get on Facebook, get on all the social media that you can, and make demands. I demand this. I demand you resign. I demand that that she be prosecuted, whatever the case may be. Here's another one, John Kerry. John Kerry is out thumbing his nose at his own country. He is acting treasonous. He's a traitor. There's just no doubt about that. And I demand that John Kerry not only step down and resign, but that the Justice Department investigate him with an eye to prosecuting him for treason. And he should be prosecuted for treason. He should be, if convicted, he should get the death penalty. You're going to we have men and women in uniform putting their lives on the line in the Middle East, and John Kerry is helping and aiding and abetting our enemies to kill our sons and daughters. No. And he's doing it as Secretary of State. It's one thing when the Trump administration was ruling the roost, and he wants to run over to Iran as a private citizen and try to screw things up. That's one thing. But to use the color of authority to undermine the interests of your own country and the people in it is unforgivable. He must be prosecuted, and he must get the death penalty. This is what Hugh Hewitt and all the Hugh Hewitts of the world are missing. Okay, there's no neutrality there. When I say John Kerry should be prosecuted and get the death penalty, there's nothing neutral about that. Okay, and there shouldn't be. There's right, there's wrong. John Kerry was wrong, and he was so far wrong, he deserves the maximum possible punishment. So you want to be a true conservative, then you have to do that. You have to come out and put the pressure where it belongs, on the left. The left wants to make gratuitous changes, and in so doing, screw up this country. We're going to put the pressure back on you. You're going to accept the consequences for the screw-ups and the problems that you have created, because that's the geniuses that do this to the left. They'll create problems and then blame it on the conservatives. Why do we have problems? We put in place a program, but why are we having problems with this? Consequences, unforeseen. Oh, it's because of the right. The left runs around every day. Everybody on the left is constantly agitating for revolutionary change. It's even in our advertisements. See, when you listen to the radio, how many times do you hear the word revolution? This is revolutionary. That's revolutionary. We've revolutionized this industry. It's all the time. Everywhere you go, the word revolution appears because of the left. And revolution is violent change. Okay? And so they get away with it because they just simply blame guns. When there's people out running around shooting, and we have a rash of it again. Now that good old Joe The old Joe administration is in charge, and Nancy Pelosi, of course. Then you've got all of their minions, all their people that think that they're revolutionaries, tin pot revolutionaries, that are going to go out and get guns and go to the local mall and start shooting the place up. That's on them. That's on Maxine Waters. That's on Hillary Clinton. That's on any and every, all of the so-called leaders of the Democrat Party. They own that. And that's what Republicans need to do. There's another mass killing, you need to get on social media and, again, demand that each one of these so-called leaders renounce revolutionary socialism and do it now. And tell the world that revolutionary socialism is destroying this country and doing it piecemeal by blowing off or by killing a few people here and a few people there and not presenting anything better in its wake. And so when we have those killings, don't just sit around and wait for the inevitable left-wing jargon about guns and the NRA and sensible, common sense gun reform. Don't sit around waiting for that, because that's what most of these reactionaries, the people, the Hugh Hewitt reactionaries do. I know it's coming. I know that the Washington Post is going to do an editorial about how we got to get rid of guns. What am I going to say? What am I going to say? You don't wait for that, because guns had nothing to do with it. Maxine Waters was in charge. This is on Maxine Waters. She created this. She created this environment. She created this culture, a culture that expects immediate change, revolutionary change, and the idea that if anybody gets in your way when you want to try to create change, you should kill them. Not one. There's pamphlets that went around in Portland, or is actually Seattle, saying that we can have paradise, but the Republicans are standing in the way and they must die. They must die. That's what it said. And not one single Democrat leader stood up and denounced that. Not one said, you know what, that's not what we're about here. Not one of them. Okay, so they own it. Okay, because it was done in the name of the left. It was done in the name of Marxism. And at the end of the day, you can call it whatever you want. You can call it progressive. You can call it this. It all comes back to Marx and Marxism. And all these people on the left have to be made accountable. Put the pressure on them to put up or shut up. Do you support this? Okay, waiting for the news people to do it is ridiculous, because the news people aren't news people. They're just, again, the propaganda arm of the Democrat Party. You have to do it. I have to do it. Get on Twitter. Make the demand. Make the demand. We want to hear from our representatives to know whether or not they support it. Not only Democrats, get the Republicans in on this as well. Because I didn't hear much from Republicans about it. I didn't hear good old Mitch, who's I guess he was too busy slamming the former president of the United States to bother to slam a memo from the left that says Republicans have to die. Okay, so make that happen. Be proactive instead of reactive. I guess that's what I'm getting to here. Back in a minute. Thank you. So now I'm going to, let's see, I think I'm going to do it. We're going to move on to, I believe it's going to be chapter 5 of Power Hungry. Again, we value on the right oil, petroleum, natural gas, and coal as not just energy, but power sources, as sources of power. Of constantly available power. Not so with wind. Wind is not constantly available. Neither is solar panels. Solar panels are great when the sun's out. Okay, and there's also the energy density that's when you're dealing with solar panels and wind is very, very low. You have to do certain things to try to increase the energy density of solar and wind power. For instance, you'll have wind farms, but they have to create a farm. You have to use acres and acres and acres of these wind turbines in order to get enough to create the intensity, the energy intensity that we need. And then again, if the wind stops, no energy. You need a constant supply of energy so that when you go in, you turn the switch on, the lights come on. Or you turn the switch off, the lights go off. That's an exact on-demand energy. And we're only going to get that from petroleum, natural gas, and coal. Now, if you as an individual, you decide, and because the question come up in your mind, hey, Ron, am I still a true conservative if I put solar panels on my house? Yes. Okay, you're doing it for your own good, and what's best for you and your family is to put solar panels on your roof. Great. I applaud you. If you're doing it, however, because you think you're going to revolutionize an industry or that you're going to put pressure on your friends and neighbors to follow suit, that you're going to, again, revolutionize the world, no, then bad for you. Thumbs down. Okay? If you want to put a windmill in your backyard, I couldn't care less. As long as it's not going to hurt the property value of the houses around you, go ahead, have at it. And if that helps you to live a better life, good for you. Good for you. So just keep your nose out of my business, and we're good to go. So let's see where we're at here with... No, we're going to go all the way to Chapter 8. I skipped the others because I'm not interested in them. Wind and solar are green. And this is a section or part, I believe it's part 2, where he's talking about the myths associated with green, quote-unquote, energy. And there's a little quote here from a guy named Witold Brzezinski. Density is green. The essence of protecting the environment can be distilled into a single phrase. Small is beautiful. That phrase gained widespread traction in the early 70s when the British economist E.F. Schumacher published a collection of essays in a book that carried that title. Of course, every source of energy production takes a toll on the environment. The essential problem with renewables is that they fail the first test of the 4 imperatives: power, density. The energy sprawl of renewables can easily be illustrated by comparing the footprint of a typical U.S. nuclear power plant, in this case the South Texas project, with that of wind and solar. Of course, estimates of power density vary. The numbers in the previous paragraph come from a variety of sources, including my own calculations. Deep green, quote-unquote, means, or at least should mean, not paving any land unless it is essential to do so. In January 2010, I interviewed Charlie Porter, a successful horse trainer who lives in northwestern Missouri. Porter said that in 2007, shortly after a wind farm was completed within a half-mile of his 20-acre farm, he, his wife, and daughter began to have trouble sleeping due to the rumbling from the turbines. Porter compared the noise to having, quote, a hat on that's way too small. It just makes your world tiny, unquote. In late 2009, exhausted by the turbine noise, the Porters purchased a house in nearby King City and moved off of their farm. The turbines, Porter told me, drove us out of our home. They just ruined life out in the country, unquote. Porter's story is not unique. Solar farms require huge arrays of panels or mirrors that cover nearly every square meter of their property. The need for more high-voltage transmission lines is perhaps the most controversial aspect of renewable energy. The 2 fission reactors at the South Texas project produced 2,700 megawatts of power. How many acres of corn ethanol would it take to produce that much power? What about wind turbines? Here are the power densities of those sources, as well as the footprints they would require to produce 2,700 megawatts, and he's got a picture in there. This is a book that's well researched, so that's another reason that I recommend that you take a look at it. It's very well researched. The prolonged fight over the Sunrise Powerlink project provides a good example of the controversy over transmission lines. The Desert Protective Council opposes big solar and says that the land rush of solar companies could potentially cover over 600,000 acres in California alone. While these projects are touted as solving the global warming crisis, the Council says they also have serious environmental impacts that need to be carefully considered. While the battle over Sunrise Power Link may be the best known of the transmission line skirmishes, many other projects are being developed across the United States, and just as with Sunrise Power Link, nearly all of them are generating controversy and opposition. To be certain, battles between landowners and the electric utilities over transmission lines are nothing new. A decade later, a grateful nation may look to Graham as not only a key enabler and architect of the worst financial collapse in modern history, but also a true American NIMBY. In 2003, just months after Graham quit the Senate, he and his wife, former Enron board member Wendy Graham, joined a group of landowners opposing high-voltage transmission line that was to be installed close to their ranch northwest of San Antonio. Instead of going across their property, the Grahams wanted the San Antonio City Public Service to route the transmission lines across Government Canyon State Natural Area, a park that had recently been established by the Texas Parks and Wildlife Department. The Grahams failed to get the power lines moved onto the park, but their efforts illustrate that NIMBY, not in my backyard, is alive and well and living well just about everywhere. NIMBY issues are not unique to transmission lines. In upstate New York, a privately held investment group called New York Regional Interconnect has been trying for years to build some 200 miles of transmission lines with towers 13 stories high that would carry electricity from the northern part of the state, where the wind resources are, to customers further south. In July 2009, a coalition of environmental groups, including the Sierra Club, the National Resources Defense Council, and the Wilderness Society, filed a lawsuit against several federal agencies in an effort to force them to change the routes of a number of planned transmission lines. And again, this is the left defeating itself. It does this all the time. Everything has to be perfect, or it just doesn't get done. And again, they're also very democratic. Everybody has to have a say. So you end up with too many cooks spoiling the broth. In mid-2009, the Lower Colorado River Authority announced plans for 600 miles of transmission lines to carry wind power from western Texas to customers in the central part of the state. While transmission lines are a key limiter for renewable energy schemes, the environmental impact of renewables extends beyond the problem of energy sprawl. Of course, every method of large-scale electricity production requires significant quantities of such materials. Excuse me. Consider the Milford Wind Corridor, a 300-megawatt wind project that was built in Utah in 2009. The project was the first to be approved under the Bureau of Land Management's new wind program for the western United States. But let's see here. Given that wind generally has a capacity factor of 33% or less, the deployment of 1 megawatt of reliable electric generation capacity at Milford actually required about 956 cubic meters of concrete. The concrete numbers on the Milford project are similar to those described in a report delivered by Per Peterson to the President's Council of Advisors on Science and Technology in September 2008. For comparison, each megawatt of power capacity in a combined cycle gas turbine power plant requires about 27 cubic meters of concrete and 3.3 tons of steel. To be fair, the concrete and steel requirements of gas-fired power plants are only part of the electricity equation. Peterson's report shows that concrete and steel requirements for wind are 9.6 times greater and 11.5 times greater, respectively, than those needed for a nuclear power plant. Even though wind power has lower power density and a huge appetite for steel and concrete, it appears that it will continue to be pursued in the years ahead, with wind turbines being located across the country. Energy sources with higher power densities have the least deleterious effect on open space. Rybczynski's endorsement of cities that echo that of Stuart Brand, who in his latest book, The Whole Earth Discipline, argues that cities and even densely populated slums provide a path out of poverty for millions of people. Embracing the density of cities makes sense, and to properly fuel them, we need energy sources with the highest possible densities. I'm not going to have the windmills on my ranch. They're ugly. And who is it? The T. Boone Pickens. Good old T. Boone he's the one that wants wind turbines, but he's not going to have it on his ranch. So anyways, ugly or not, wind power has become the most hyped segment of the green energy alternatives. So, and that's going to bring us to chapter 9. But again, give you some good solid ideas about the problems and remembering the main thing that every true conservative needs to remember: energy is irrelevant. Power is king. Okay, the left doesn't want to talk about power. They want to talk about energy. And so that's a way they win the argument, or at least appear to win the argument. Green energy. And like the quote that you heard in the beginning of the chapter, density is green. Okay? You're going to use less concrete. You're going to use less steel. You're going to need less square acres in order to generate much more power. Okay? Because it isn't energy that runs our cell phones. It's power. The power that energy provides. So, again, we need to be clear on that we're not sitting around waiting for the New York Times to tell us what to talk about. You hear that from the Hugh Hewitts of the world. He talks about whatever it is that's in the newspaper. He'll complain that the New York Times and other newspapers are left-wing rags and propaganda instruments, and he'll bemoan, gee, it used to be better in the old days. But next day, he'll be quoting the New York Times. Hey, I read this article in the New York Times. They all do this. Sean Hannity's famous for it too. So even to John and Ken, who are regularly denouncing the what they now call, it used to be the Los Angeles Times. Oh, they call it the El Segundo Times because they moved to El Segundo. But they're regularly denouncing it for being just a worthless left-wing rag. And then the next day they'll say, hey, I read this fascinating article in the Los Angeles Times. Well, why are you quoting them? If they're a worthless rag, why do you read it? Why even bother? Because if they didn't, they wouldn't know what to talk about. Okay? So that's what the true conservative is, the person that discovers what is it that we truly value, the status quo. What is the status quo? Life is a status quo, and power-wise, it is petroleum, natural gas, and coal. And we promote that. Do yourself a favor and do everyone else a favor. Get a t-shirt with an Exxon logo on it, with a Chevron logo on it, with a Texaco logo on it, even with Arco. Arco's British. Shell is Dutch. But promote it. Get a t-shirt with that. Get a t-shirt that advertises, a bumper sticker. Put that on your car. Maybe get some things to put in your home. Posters of various sorts. Push back. That's what the left calls it. Push back. Okay? Oil and gas are here. They're here for hundreds of years. We've got enough resources in the ground, and we're finding new ways to reach oil and gas deposits that we couldn't reach yesterday. It's not going anywhere. There's not going to be any energy burnout. We got plenty. And the other thing that we are forgetting, gasoline-powered internal combustion engines, yes, they used to be enormous polluters. I grew up in Southern California, and we had smog alerts in different stages. First stage, second stage, third stage. If we're in a third stage smog alert, it means that as kids, we weren't allowed to go outside. You couldn't go outside and play because of the smog. You couldn't see the mountains. The smog was so bad. Now, that never happens. The only time the mountains are blotted out is because of rain and fog. And as a matter of fact, the South Coast Air Quality Management District has said that the air in the LA area, in the LA basin, is cleaner today than it was in 1950. And why? because manufacturers, internal combustion engine manufacturers, which is chiefly automobiles, have made the engines more efficient. So you have less emissions. There are some cars I see, it says PZEV or NZEV, near zero emission vehicle or partial zero emission vehicle. And if you've ever been behind a car from the 1970s, or especially one from the 1940s, the stench is unbelievable. So even though we have more cars on the road today in Southern California than we did in 1950, the air is cleaner. And that's because of, our advances, the scientific advances that we've made in making internal combustion engines more efficient and providing, for coal, for instance, they have smokestacks that they call scrubbing that will basically filter out all the bad particles from coal. So there's nothing about petroleum or natural gas or coal. There's no problem that can't be mitigated. We can find ways to mitigate the downsides of those. Not necessarily so of wind and solar. So that brings me to the conclusion of another episode of The Drill. Be honest, be smart, and be beautiful. And remember that the left has no authority, no power, and they can't win.